like a tenor in an old hillbilly band.
Hey folks, today we're learning the split guitar solo section from High Note. That's Dierks Bentley featuring Billy Strings, but also featuring folks like Sam Bush and Bryan Sutton. Now I heard this for the first time a couple weeks ago and it just blew my mind. I texted my friends like, have we entered an alternate dimension where pop country songs talk about things like flat and scrugs and G-runs? It was wild. I had to listen to it 3 times in a row. By the way, I can hear you bluegrass music snobs from here. You're saying, Marcel, what are you doing? Covering a pop country song? That's not bluegrass. First of all, Dierks has bluegrass cred. Here's him jamming with the boys from like 4 years ago. Secondly, the guitar breaks are fun, and this song posed a mystery that I couldn't resist. See, about halfway through, Billy Strings splits a guitar solo with someone. And see, I was watching the music video and I was like, who's this guy? By the way, put a pin in that. We're gonna come back to that later. Now I know that Bryan Sutton does a ton of session work for these Nashville cats, and I know that Bryan Sutton and Dierks Bentley are kind of frequent collaborators, but it didn't really sound like a flat picker playing the second break in the recording to me. So I felt like I needed more evidence that it was Bryan Sutton before I texted him. But then I found this quote where Dierks says, Bryan Sutton first tipped me off to Billy Strings about 7 years ago, mentioning that the future of bluegrass was in good hands. Okay, Bryan has talked to Dierks about Billy, and they've worked together before, so Bryan probably has some info. So I texted Bryan and I said, hey, who's the other guitar player that trades breaks with Billy on Dierks' tune High Note? Doesn't sound like you. And Bryan says that song has gone through a few different iterations. I'm checking with the mix engineer to see who that is. I think it is me. Now here's the proof that Bryan Sutton just is the man. Bryan texted me back with all of the session notes, just dropped them in my lap, and explained the whole thing. So the main riff and the rhythm throughout is Bryan Sutton and Charlie Worsham. So I look up Charlie, and what do I find? Well, number one, Charlie is the other guitar player in the music video. But also, I find this video of Charlie singing this very same tune that he wrote in the Station Inn with Bryan Sutton on guitar. Bryan also says that he's playing banjo and John Randall is playing mandolin. Of course, Sam Bush is playing mandolin for the later jam section of the tune. Oh, by the way, did I mention that? This whole song ends with like a jam grass section at the very end. How crazy is that? And the last thing Bryan's text message said is double BS on the solo. Which means we live in a universe where Billy Strings and Bryan Sutton trade flat picking breaks on a pop country tune. Insane. By the way, I still don't think the second break sounds like Bryan Sutton, but that must just be a testament to his ability as a session musician. Anyway, before we learn these breaks, let's go over a couple of technical details that will really help you learn this thing. First of all, your guitar setup. I'm positive that Billy Strings plays his break in standard tuning using C shapes, and I'm 90% sure that Bryan Sutton also plays his guitar in standard tuning with C shapes. However, the main riff of the song is played in drop C, as in C, G, C, F, A, D. But don't retune yet. Stay in standard tuning, and we're going to learn these solos. We'll talk about the riff later, I promise. Besides that info, I just really want to make sure that you know a handful of pentatonic shapes. So in this break, we play over 3 chords, C, F, and G, and over the course of the 2 guitar solos, we basically only use 3 pentatonic boxes. And those boxes are 2, 3, and 4, which is interesting. We don't actually use box 1, I don't think. Anyway, if you don't know all of your pentatonic boxes, there are a million YouTube videos that you can learn them from. I'm only going to teach the ones that are necessary for you to really understand how this song functions. So in Billy's break and in Brian's break, we see this C shape. I call it box 4, but it's the C pentatonic shape that's by the open strings, and it sounds like this. Now in Brian's break specifically, we also see box 2 for the C shape, which is all the way up here. Really cool lick Brian plays. And then after that, if we're thinking about the F chords, we do see box 3, which is my favorite pentatonic box, by the way. It sounds like this. And we also see box 4 coming up in Brian's break. Remember, we already talked about box 4 for the C shape. This is a repeat. It's just happening in a different part of the fretboard. Moving on to the G, we see box 2. We already talked about box 2 over the C chord, but now it's over a G chord. And we also see a little bit of what I think is box 3 for the G chord. Billy kind of maybe implies the G chord a little bit in part of his break. It looks like this. And the very last thing I want to show you is something Brian does in his break, and it's this big diagonal pentatonic shape, which is something that a lot of country guys do. And it looks like this. It's really about visualizing that shape. Playing it with the slides just helps you move it around the fretboard. You don't always have to play it with those slides in those exact places. It's just an easy way to understand it. Okay, now that you know all those pentatonic shapes, watch the performance again and try to spot which pentatonic boxes are being used in different places. I know that's a tall order, but this is the kind of thinking that will allow you to figure out more breaks like this on your own without me. So go ahead, watch the video.
Like a tenor in an old hillbilly band.
Alright, so if we're going through the full break now, we're starting the Billy break, and he's starting in that box 3 of the F chord. So there's box 3 pentatonic of the F chord. He's starting on the root note right here, 6th fret of the B string. He's going to use the minor third now, going down to the flat 7. Remember, you got to start on an upstroke because nothing happens on beat 1. That's that whole first measure. Now to make this a little bit easier, I like to put a slide from 7 to 8, and it helps me shift a little bit easier. That's how I get into the next measure. You can think of this measure as the same shape, just moved up 2 frets. And you can think of it almost like Billy's implying a G chord a little bit over this F chord. It's not exactly what he's doing per se, but it's a nice way to visualize it and kind of get it under your fingers. Escape note at the very end with that open E string. So talking about just that second measure now, I still have my pinky up on 8th, and I'm going to reach up with my index finger, 5th fret of the E string, and then I have 2 16th notes. Now I'm just going to play that pull off as fast as possible, basically. It's just this really quick, Irish musicians would call it a cut. Don't forget to play that open E string at the very end so you can escape. You can shift your hand back down. Really classic bluegrass guitar technique. You want to take advantage of that. So moving on to the next passage here, starting right at the beginning of measure 3. That lick, this sort of like dirty third thing where I have the minor third and the major third of the C chord, and they're on 2 separate strings, so they ring against each other. It's a really classic, like, Doc Watson move. Billy loves Doc. Billy does it all the time, too. So this whole measure sounds like this. Now, to set myself up for this, I kind of bar the G string and the B string with my index finger. I guess in the 3rd and 4th notes in this measure, I'm barring with my index finger. And I'm leaving that finger down because I'm going to need it for that pull-off. And once again, that's 2 16th notes. Basically, I'm going to play that pull-off real quick. So these 3 measures together. Okay, let's move on to the fourth measure. So we got an enclosure around the third, right? There's that F note, the E flat below, and then finally the E in the middle, right? It's slightly above, slightly below than the note I want to hit. We're enclosing that important note. Now you'll notice that everything we just played in measures 3 and 4 here, this is all in box 4 of the C major pentatonic, basically that box that has all the open strings. Now it's not only the notes in that pentatonic because we're adding a lot of blue notes. Most of those are the minor third of the given chord, but sometimes Billy's playing with those relationships a little bit, right? Maybe he's holding a chord a little bit longer, or maybe he's waiting to acknowledge the chord. Stuff is very common in bluegrass as well. Anyway, here we go. Here's the first line. Let's move on to the next line. So in the next line, we get this repeating pattern, which is really classic stuff for Billy. It sounds like this. For the very last time that he does those back and forth sort of Doc Watson thing, he tugs on that string just a little bit. You can do that if you want to. Now this is a repeating 3-note pattern for at least the first 2 repetitions. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and your pick strokes end up reversed. Make sure that you're doing that. So it's down, down, then up, down, up, down, up, down, up, and just up, down, up to finish it. The first 2 measures of this line sound like this. Let's move on. So now we're going into box 2 of the G chord. The chord is changing. Billy's seeing things in box 2. The other guitar player is doing just sort of like a quick slide to get ready before he plays, and it kind of overlaps with Billy's a little bit. They shake hands right there. Don't be confused by that. So just measure 3 of this line sounds like this. I guess I wrote a hammer on too. Great. And that last measure is just drones, right? Not too tough. You can copy those rhythms exactly if you want to, or you can just kind of grab the vibe of that section and then replicate it however you want. So that whole line sounds like this. Which means all of Billy's break sounds like this. Something like that. Which takes us into Bryan's break. So let's look at the first line of Bryan's break. So once again, we have nothing on beat 1. We're coming in off the and we're immediately going to use that F major diagonal pentatonic. He starts that diagonal pentatonic shape, turns it into an arpeggio, then continues the diagonal pentatonic shape and turns it into this double stop. It sounds like this. Cool. So we're ignoring the beginning. Our original diagonal pentatonic shape, right, had all this. So we're not going to do the whole thing. Instead, we're starting on our A string, right? 3, 5, and that's going to be up, down, right? We're starting off the beat. And we have those 2 16th notes again. This slide happens to be a very quick slide. They're not all like that, but this one is. And this next slide is going to be a really quick one too. Now this double stop is really cool. Maybe I should have mentioned it earlier. But if you imagine your F chord up here, you imagine putting a 7 on it up there. He's just grabbing the 2 highest notes of that, right? So it's kind of like this F7 shape, and he's just curling it up. He actually does it twice, right? He's going to do it again. Really cool thing to do. When I grab that shape, I am using my ring finger and my pinky, just because that's how my hand is kind of set up. You can watch my hand get to that point. Right, the 2 fingers that are set up to play that double stop happen to be my ring and my pinky. Now this next lick gives me trouble. I don't like it, and I'll show you how I fake it. But he plays 2 upstrokes in a row to catch this, and then down. Right. If you find that difficult, you know, ba-da-da-da, you can just play an upstroke across all 3 of those strings, all 3 of those strings. So just up all the way through, and then come back down to play the next 2 notes. I find a lot of people when they're starting out with a lick like this have an easier time like that. Anyway, after we play that, which I bet will give you trouble if you've never played something like that, we have this. Sounds like that. And this is just thinking about that pentatonic box again. Right? We're going back into what would kind of be box 1 of the C major pentatonic, but the chord is switching to F, so Bryan Sutton once again plays the F arpeggio. And it ends with that, which is the 7 of the F chord. You can imagine this little F7 chord right there. It's like a D7, but I've scooted it up. And then he's tugging on the 7th of that chord. So this whole line together is quite a challenge, but it sounds like this. Remember not to let people hear your bends come back down. I'm talking about the very last bend. You want to stop that before it comes back down. Don't want that. Don't do that. Just let it go up, and then it cuts off. And I'm using the back of this hand to do that. So moving on to the last little bit of Bryan's break, it sounds like this. Same bend. Now, there is a problem with this break. So if you look at the end of the first measure of this line, it's really hard to hear in the recording. I don't know exactly what Bryan does right there, but some kind of slide maneuver right there. This is close enough. No one would ever call you out and be like, that's not what's on the record. So don't stress about it. There you go. That's the end of Bryan's break. So Bryan's whole break, right? Let's play that. It would sound like this. Like that, which takes us all the way to the main riff of the tune, which means I need a guitar and drop C. This guitar, by the way, has the deadest strings on it, and you can hear it in my demo. So I'm thinking about this song with D shapes now. So everything that you're about to see is kind of like bluesy D major language if I was in normal drop D. And the lick goes like this. A lot of work with your index finger, right? Slide with the index, and then I got ring middle, popping up to that open C string. Gonna be a hammer on, index middle, index middle, yeah, that's right. Pull off with my index, slide with my index, pull off with my index again. Sounds like that. Now the next measure is very similar, it's just got a slightly different ending. It's my open F string, right? What would normally be my G string. Moving on to the next line of the lick, it should look pretty familiar. Maybe you didn't expect that. Let's talk about that. So you want to set up on this line so that last slide happens on your middle finger. You can watch me do that again. All the fingering is the same. Pull off with my middle. Slide with my middle. Now I have my index free to play this chromatic line, which is going to be index, middle, ring, pinky. Right? It's kind of a straightforward line. It's got a ton of eighth notes. Basically, the end of each line has these like quarter notes or an offbeat thing. In the case of the very last line, a little bit of syncopation there. But it's pretty straightforward. You just got to read carefully. Playing the whole lick, it sounds like this. And that's the main riff. Now that you've learned all that, go ahead and watch the performance with the tab up above. Play along. If the playback's a little quick, all you have to do is hit the settings wheel and you can slow things down to a more manageable speed. As always, the tab will be available for free at lessonswithmarcel.com. Just go over there, snag a copy when you're done with the video.
Like a tenor in an old hillbilly band.
Thank you so much for watching this lesson. This was a really interesting one. This recording still kind of blows my mind. I love it so much. It's so weird. If you like this video, there's so much more like this on this channel. You can learn all about flat picking guitar, bluegrass guitar. I recently put out a Tony Rice book that has, I believe, 80 transcriptions. It's over 100 pages. It is a free PDF. Well, technically it is set your own price, and that's because I'm accepting tips. So if you enjoy the work that I do here, just write a number in there, whatever you think the book is worth, and snag yourself a copy. Also, don't forget that this tab is available for free at the website. Go snag it. All right, folks. I'll see y'all later.
Yeah, that's my plan.